Hi all, welcome to today's video. So we were started looking into unit 2. So we saw what is data literacy and how to become a data literate, right, in our previous video. So in continuation of that, we will move into the next topic. We are going to look about once we become how to know how to read the data, we need to understand how to acquire the data, and there are different types of data acquisition techniques. So we are going to look about that, and then once we acquire the data, how to process it. So we'll see about data acquiring, data processing, and data interpretation. Once it is processed, how we can interpret the data to arrive a meaningful insight from that. So everything we'll see in today's video. It is going to be a bit lengthy video, but yes, you will get a clear understanding of what each and every term is meant. Yeah, let's get into the today's video. We'll see about first one is what are the types of data. Okay, so when we say types, so we have two types of data in that. Okay, number one is textual data, so which we call it as a qualitative data. Don't get confused. Qualitative data. Okay, and the second one we say it as a numeric data. Okay, there are only two types of data: numeric data, which we also call it as a quantitative data. So how to remember this both, because we get confused, right? So think about the comments and ratings which are there. Okay, so for example, comments, and if you the same example which I discussed in the previous video I will take. So if you go to a restaurant, you will see good or bad comments. So that refers to the quality, right? So it is called a qualitative textual data. So good or bad. And then we see about rating, right? Number 4, number 5. That refers to the quantity, right? So for example, quantity means how much amount that we mean. So that we call it as a numeric data. And in numeric data, we have two different types. Okay, we have two different types, and one is continuous data, and second one is discrete data. Okay, this we will see in the upcoming video. And then after this, we have, once we see into these topics, we have types of acquisition techniques. Okay, how data can be acquired in different methods. Okay, so number one is through data discovery, and number two using data augmentation. Number three using data generation. So once we see about all these three, then we will have a clear idea how to acquire data. So once we have a clear idea, then we'll see about features of data. Okay, features of data will be discussed. There are two types in this. We have two types of in data features. Okay, we have two types. One is dependent feature. I'll start with independent feature, and second one is dependent feature. Okay, yeah. So mostly we will be discussing about all these topics. Just try to understand first the level of just try to understand what each and every term mean. What does data discovery mean? What does data augmentation mean? Just try to understand and correlate with one example. I will also tell you one example, so you will be able to understand the terminologies, right? So then we can go into the depth. Okay, so going to start from here. So this is what I told, right? So first we are going to see about types of data. In types of data, we have two types. One is textual, that is called qualitative, and which is made of words and phrases used for natural language, right? So how will the AI model identify the words and which we give? Okay, it can be any word, good, bad, or tree, house. These words the AI model has to identify. So this we call it as a textual type of data. And the second one is numerical, that is quantitative data, used for statistical and for further divided into, okay, this is used for statistical. As I told, this is used for natural language and this is used for statistical. If you remember in the previous video, we were discussing about the domains of AI, right? So there are three types of domain. One is computer vision, statistical data, and the third one is natural language processing. So already we have seen the two. The other one, apart from this, is image based and video based. So that only we call it as a computer vision. So in this, we are going to discuss about only these two. Okay, and we also have the third type, which is called image based, okay, which is used for computer vision. And this numeric data is further divided into continuous and discrete, okay. So continuous means whenever, for example, I will give you measurements like height, okay. So in the class there are many students, you measure the height and weight of the students, so that we call it as a continuous data. And then discrete mean whole numbers. So for example, if you take continuous, the weight can be 50.5, 45.8, so like that we will get in integers. But here discrete will always be in whole numbers, such as count of students. So in a class, how many students are there? 50, 60. That cannot be an integer 50.5. So we always refer to that as a discrete number, okay. It is not continuous, it is discrete. So we have seen about types of data. Once after this, we will move to the data acquisition, okay. So once you know what are the types are there, so for starting any project, you need to acquire the data required for that project, okay. So in the next video, in next subtopic, we are going to see how to develop a dashboard, okay. I will also give you one example just as a sample how to develop a dashboard with the data taken from the government website. So there first we will see how to get the data. It can be of different sources, okay. It can be from government website or Kaggle, or where we are having our personal data which is collected from different people. If we take a sample of 50 and we collect them, right, so that also it is called as a data discovery part, okay. So data discovery, there are three types, right. So first is data discovery. Data discovery means searching for and downloading the data sets from the internet, okay. So for example, I have given you weather forecast data sets. So to predict, if you are creating a model to predict the weather, upcoming weather, you need to download the previous history of data sets and you have to give it as a training data. Then only you can predict our future results from that training data, okay. That we call it as a data discovery part. And what is data augmentation? So you already have an existing data, so you need to add more volume to that existing data by doing some minimal changes. So for example, you have an image based data, so it can be an image of a road or image of the house. You want to increase the number of training data, okay. So you add brightness and color, so it will give different combination of the same picture, right. So we giving, instead of one or two pictures of the house, we can change the brightness, increase the contrast of that particular image, and we can feed as a more amount of training data. So that we call it as a data augmentation, increasing the volume of data by making small changes to our existing copies, okay. And then third one is data generation. So recording new data using sensors such as temperature reading. So we have many IoT devices, sensors, CCTV cameras. So what are all data is getting generated to these type of devices, we call it as a data generation. And so it can be an example of survey or poll. So this is called, these are the three types of data acquisition methods, okay. And then this first one, right, so this first one we told about collecting data from the sources. So there are two types when we are downloading data. So one is a primary source of data and second is secondary source of our data. So while doing the data discovery part, there are two types. So first is a primary data source. So in primary data source, we have when we take any survey or interview, when we conduct interview and take, we are noting down our results about the person, each person which we are taking, right? What is their score, what is their permanent phone number or address, all these things we are noting down in our record, right? So that we call it as a primary source of data, okay. And what is called a secondary source of data can be from collecting from Kaggle website or government websites, whichever we or Google search, it can be called as a secondary data. Okay, and then once we acquire the data, I will tell you what are all the best practices for collecting the data. Okay, so for example, that we call it as a good data. So how the good data can be defined? It has to be structured. It has to be structured means, so if you take one column, so for example age column, so the age of the students has to be only in the integer column. Okay, so the age has to be 15, 16. It cannot have like 15.5, or it cannot have alphabets in that. So that we call it as a structured way. So in the format of rows and columns. Okay, that we call it as a structure. And then accurate. Our primary source of data or any good data has to be accurate, and then it has to be consistent, and it has to be relevant. So whichever project which we are doing, relevant to that it has to be. So this I call it as a good data. And what bad data means? Bad data is just opposite, whichever is not structured, that is unstructured, or it is not accurate. It might have duplicate values or null values, or it is not consistent. It is not consistent across all the sources. So, and it is not relevant. So that we call it as a bad data. And developers must follow ethical guidelines. So while developing any model, it is the job of the developer to follow the ethical guidelines, including the consent, transparency, anonymity, and accountability. Okay, just try to understand how the good data and how bad data should be, and then what are the best practices, okay, while doing data acquisition method. And then we move to data features. Okay, so while we are creating a model, so just I have created one diagram. So while we are creating a model, right, so we are going to give input, as well as once it crosses the model, it will give us the desired output. Okay, so the input, right, that we call it as, since for example if I'm going to calculate weather report, right, so the weather has a different scenarios like humidity, temperature, and everything it will be precipitation, everything it will be having, right, all the inputs. So that is not dependent on any other value. Okay, it is independent. Okay, so that we call it as a independent feature. And after crossing the model, whatever the output, the predicted output, right, that we call it as a dependent variable or dependent feature, because it is depending on the input which we give, right. So that we call it as a dependent feature. So they just remember, input means we call it as a independent feature, and output means we call it as a dependent feature. Okay, that is what I have explained here. Independent features, these would include data points like person's age, education, income, and marital status. And dependent feature, which is the output. Okay, this would be the final result of the model, identify such as whether a specific item was purchased or not. This is as an example I have given. So it will give purchased or not, it will give yes or no. So it is depending on the input whether he has purchased. It will look into the data and it will give the desired output. So this is what we have discussed today. Next we will move into different types of data processing, and then we look into data interpretation. After understanding what are the features of data, right, now we are going to continue to see about, once we acquire, how to process the data and how to interpret the data. So we need to understand what is called as data interpretation and data processing. Okay, that we are going to see in continuation. As we have seen, so we'll continue to see about what is data processing. What is data processing, and then we'll continue to see what is data interpretation. Okay, after this we'll see, then we will have a better idea, right. So once we have, in data interpretation we have different methods to interpret, right. So we have two types here. One is qualitative DI, and the other one is quantitative DI. So these we call it as methods, quantitative DI. So this we call it as methods. And after that, in data interpretation, we have different types. Okay, so we have three types, that I will put it down. So this we call it as types. We have three types, 1, 2, and 3. So we call it this as a types of data interpretation. Types of DI. So while when we want to represent our data in a meaningful fashion, how we can represent, so that we are going to discuss it here in the types. So first is textual way. In textual way we can represent textual DI, and the second one is tabular format in the form of tabular DI. Okay, and third one is graphical format, graphical DI. Okay, this we will discuss now. I'll move into the slide. So yeah, so once we understand the features, right, different features, independent features we have two, and after that we have acquired, we have collected. Next, with the collected data, what we are going to do next? We have to process the data. Okay, so data processing means, so for example, I'll give you to understand the difference between interpretation and processing. Okay, so processing means I'll take the exact column, okay, age column for a student. So in that age column, if it has to be a structured way, it has to be only integer, right? So it cannot have different alphabets or alphanumeric. It cannot have different values. It only should have a numerical values. Okay, if in case there are any missing values, okay, we are going to represent it as 0. Okay, so we are processing the raw data. We are performing some operations to make it a meaningful and understandable. So we do not want any hyphen, or it is there, we'll just replace it with a 0, so data is not available. So we are processing it into a understandable way, so that we call it as a data processing. And then from the processed data we are trying to interpret a new insight. Okay, so when we want to see how many students are between the age of 10 to 15, okay, if there are 50 students, that interpretation we are taking, right, that we call it as a data interpretation. So so for example, data processing means using computers to perform operations on raw data to make it understandable. And what is data interpretation? The process of making sense, okay, of the processed data which we processed in the previous step, right, to arrive at a meaningful decision and answer our critical questions. Okay, so that we call it as a data interpretation. So first is data acquiring, second is data processing, and third one is data interpretation. So once we understand processing, next we move to the methods of data interpretation, right? I told there are two types. One is a qualitative and the second one is quantitative DI. So what is these two the difference? So qualitative data interpretation means this method focuses on categorical value. So what is categorical value? In order to understand that, just remember these two words, okay? So just remember how and why. So how this happened and why this happened. We would come up with the answers such as this happened because the input is like this. So it can be based on, it can be never described on numbers. Okay, it can be only described on words. So that we call it as a qualitative data interpretation. Okay, so for example, whether that product has been purchased or not, yes or no. So like these we try to classify the output, right? So that we call it as a qualitative data interpretation. And next, what is quantitative data interpretation? This is a method where numerical data, okay, how often this happened 3 times, and how many have been sold, 5,000 items has been sold, where we arrive a numerical data, right? That we call it as a quantitative data interpretation. So this is the main difference between qualitative DI and quantitative DI. And next we move on to the types of DI. So in types we have 3, right? First one is textual, second one is tabular, and third one is graphical. So when we want to represent our feelings, our emotions, right? So I am happy, I am sad, my mood, I express my mood. So when a company wants to understand, when it has implemented a policy, whether the employees are satisfied or happy with that, they are trying to understand their mood and emotions, right? So we represent that kind of emotion in a textual format. So that we call it as a textual type of data interpretation. So data is mentioned in a paragraph, or this can be a small data sets. It can be a cloud word, okay. So when it can be a cloud word, I can say it as an example, or emotions. Okay, so that we call it as a textual data. And second is a tabular format. Data is systematically organized in the form of rows and columns with the clear headings. Okay, so for example, if we take a pivot table or any table represented, in the first column we have number of marks and the percentage calculated for that. So all this can be represented in a tabular format. So that we call it as a tabular data representation, data interpretation. And third one is graphical format. Okay, graphical format is the most widely used format across all organizations, how they want to see the data. It can be of different charts like a bar chart, pie chart, line chart. Just try to, do not try to mean like, yes, you can have some basic idea, but that basic knowledge is enough, because in the upcoming video I have taken one data set, sample data set, and I will in live I will try to help you, and I will try to show you how we can create these type of bar charts, textual data and tabular format. So you will have a better understanding. So just try to get familiarized with these terminology. So that is more important in this point. So yeah, we have completed our second topic in the data literacy. That is, we have covered the types of data, and then we have seen what is data acquisition, different methods of data acquisition, then features of data. Then we saw about what is data processing and interpretation. In interpretation we saw what are the methods of data interpretation, and then what are the types of data interpretation we can see. So in the next video I will show you, I'm using Power BI. Okay, so there we will see how we can create a dashboard, a sample dashboard or easy dashboard, so that you can also try it on your own. Yeah, thank you.